You ever heard the phrase kind of management by walking around?
Yep.
Yeah, I think Chef Chris had just kind of through time, through example, he's the kind of guy that can walk into the kitchen and everyone stands up a little straighter and cleans up their boards. And I think his just presence of being there and being consistent, it really sets the tone. It sets the example for how everyone ought to be in the kitchen. And it wasn't through fear. I never saw him like screaming at people. Although I heard he used to be, a little more intense in his younger days. But he's got his daughters now, and he's. I think he's realized he doesn't have to do that anymore, and people I think respond better to a little more level-headed. You can be serious, you can be professional, but it doesn't have to be that old school. The level of leading by fear, which is how it used to be for a long time.
Yeah, you also taught me, you didn't use these words, but like freedom to kind of create and do your own thing. I wrote down long leash.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that's important to have this space?
Well, you're giving people who are already naturally ambitious autonomy, and I think the people who are naturally ambitious are looking to make decisions, and they feel gratified and rewarded from the ability to make their own decisions. So if you give people that flexibility, they don't feel so confined. They're not going to be looking for the door. They say, okay, I have the freedom to play in this sandbox under these rules, under this standard, and then they can execute. So
yeah, if you have a high standard, if you have a high standard for good people, let them be good people. Give them that space to blossom into their potential. And I think you benefit as the owner when you have that level of perspective under why not open yourself up to that voice, that talent, that passion, and be better together.
Right. One thing we found at Finestkind is it's such a small team. I find myself taking on a lot. But I think if you have enough people with you, in the case of Central, it's a fairly large team. You can delegate and trust in people as long as the standard is clear and you hold people to the standard, which they've always done. Chris and Paige have always done very well and very respectfully and professionally. And I think it's probably easier on the chef owner for them to not have to do everything themselves. Trust in people.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro.
With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, chef and co-owner of Finestkind, Tom Barthelmes. My man Tom, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Feeling unstoppable.
Dude, psyched to have you here. You were called out by past boss and now partner, Paige Gould, and she had amazing things to say about you and Victoria. Victoria couldn't make it today. Sorry you couldn't be here, Victoria. Maybe in the future I can get you behind the microphone. But today we're here to share your story, how you got here. I can't wait to dive in. But first, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Sure. I think one that kind of resonated with me when I was starting this whole process is a Goethe quote, old German writer, where he basically says, the moment one commits oneself, then providence moves too. I think it's really kind of a deep quote that just means if you think you can, you should start, and suddenly all these new pathways will open for you that make it worth starting. There's magic in just starting and beginning.
I love that.
And going.
Say it one more time.
The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too.
Yeah, man, I love that, and it's hitting hard with me right now. So I'm on this commitment of reading. I'm reading 2 books once a week, or one. I'm alternating between 2 books every other week. The first book is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, and the second book is Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. And both those books just focus on achieving big, audacious, hairy goals, and like developing habits and setting goals and like the things you can do. And that's a big part of what the compound effect is all about. Just start and stay consistent, and it compounds and things just start to happen. Right? Yeah, man, it's super powerful school of thought. Great way to get this thing started. And before we kind of tell your story, give us an idea of where you are today relative to your business. So where are you today?
Sure. So Finestkind opened very quietly September 1st. We missed the summer. Our original plan was to open for this past summer, and that old cliche that restaurants are more difficult and more expensive to open than you're going to anticipate is pretty true.
There's some truth there. Yeah.
So we're new. We're very new. We've only been open, I guess, 5 months, September, October, November, December, and now January. Gosh, it's been 5 months, which is like
You guys are closed today. Breakfast, lunch.
We're closed today. Yep. Tuesdays,
Open
Wednesdays.
5 days a week.
5 days a week for now.
Catering.
We are doing some catering. Yeah, we just did a wedding for 115 people up in Topsom.
Okay.
Which was a lot of fun.
Awesome. So the question everybody wants to know, percent profit.
Percent profit, sure. I think there have been a lot of extra expenses kind of associated with just opening a restaurant. But I don't think it's also fair to say that, expenses only happen when you first open a restaurant. They're always going to be there. So we are a bit above our break even. We're still in a single digit. And I think when we had first started, before we had a couple surprise expenses, we were getting close to 10%.
Awesome.
Single digits,
we'll dive into that, man. We'll pick that apart and we'll talk about the challenges associated with opening. And that's why we're here, to get vulnerable. I think, it's a hard industry, man. And when I started this podcast, I was inspired by all these tech entrepreneurs sharing how they make their millions and how you can do it too, making money online. And I was like, I want to create this motivational, inspirational podcast for the restaurant owners and talking about how all these restaurant owners are making millions and millions of dollars. And the reality is that's the top 1% of the 1% that are doing that. Yeah. We don't get into the restaurant industry to get rich. We can, but it doesn't happen overnight. I think it's just the reality of the industry. That's really hard work, and I want to dive into those realities. I want to be transparent. So thank you for being vulnerable and opening up, man. I appreciate that. So you have a really great back story in terms of pedigree, where you came from. So where does it make sense to start telling that story?
I started as a child, as we most of us do. I started washing dishes at 15 years old. I knew I wanted to cook. I cooked a lot as a kid growing up. My grandmother lived with us, which is, to me, as a kid was very normal, but actually seemed like most people didn't have their grandparent living with them growing up. So she taught me a lot behind the stove. I was often cooking breakfasts for the family with my grandmother. I think that kind of started the passion and love I had for cooking. Yeah. I think as a teenager, I decided I wanted to pursue it seriously. It was kind of a new age of TV in the industry, and Top Chef was a big deal, and all these cooking shows were coming to life. I mean, I watched Top Chef right after, I'd watch Rachel Ray and Julia Child reruns, on PBS. So I was really kind of obsessed with it, and I think I wanted to go very high end with it. So I think when I was 15 or 16, I Googled best restaurant in America and very naively said, that's going to be my goal.
Per se?
And per se was the goal. So that's what I set out to do. And I went to culinary school, went to the CIA in Hyde Park. That's where I met my wife, partner, Victoria. And then we went from there.
Now, did you work in restaurants before going to CIA?
I did, yeah. I got a job starting as a dishwasher in Manchester, New Hampshire. Jerome's Deli. He was the only guy that would hire me at 15. Nice. But I really wanted to get that experience in to be able to go to the CIA, because at the time it was either 6 months or a year of experience. And nobody was hiring me, so he gave me a chance. And then eventually I got to be a prep cook and then a line cook. And then, before I graduated high school, I was kind of a manager. And I really admired Jerry, who was my boss. He was tough, hard ass, sometimes scary in his intensity, but he also showed me how to mop a floor. He showed me how to work hard.
Yeah. Reflecting back at your younger self and looking at, wanting to go work for the best restaurant, all this, do you think that this idea of the best restaurant kind of holds up in terms of, I feel like a lot of people set their eyes on the Michelin stars, the James Beard, and the glitz, the glam, the top 1%, right? The restaurants that serve the top 1% of people, right? Do you think that there's is that what am I trying to say? Is there a false reality there?
I think it's sort of like the question, what's the best wine? And I think the answer to that is it's whatever wine you like to drink. Yeah. I think the best restaurant, if it's the Michelin starred, if it's the dozens of man hours that go into one dish and is really technically precise and beautiful and elegant, if that's what does it for you, then I suppose it is the best. But I think I've also had meals that were just as meaningful or just as delicious in much more casual environments than it was more about the company that I was with.
Yeah.
So I think, that goal of shooting for a Michelin star kitchen, I think, is a good starting place. I learned a ton.
I bet.
A ton. And those are lessons that I really, really value and treasure from working it. But I'm also, I think, a little bit wiser now and know what's important to me.
What is important to you?
Making people happy.
Yeah.
Actually making people happy.
Yeah. I'm happy you said that because, one thing when we're talking about, like, I asked you about the profit, right? And I think that what's really important and you have to wrap your mind about or around in this industry is that success is relative. Success isn't about making millions of dollars. Success could be if you love making pasta and you want a place to share your passion with pasta and work in a kitchen all day rolling pasta, and you're doing that and people see you and love you and you're paying your bills, is that not success?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of our first meetings we had with our team here, it was kind of half a joke, but half serious, is that if I was just here to make money, I probably would be doing something else. Yeah. As a business, we need to be making money, but we're also here balancing that with some other priorities, and that's being part of a community, making people happy.
Right. But you see so many people who are like successful in the sense of they scale and they have all these restaurants and they're working 70, 80 hours a week. And are they happy?
Well, I think it's case by case. I think there are some people who really thrive in environments like that. I've worked with those people, and I think I was maybe even a bit envious of those people that could just handle and thrive and almost need that pressure. And I found that I did not do as well with that pressure and wanted to kind of reevaluate. I know for me, the answer would be no, I wasn't happy doing that.
When you were in that world.
Yeah.
I mean, you look, and this is something I like to talk about because you look at some of the people who are quote unquote the best, and this isn't everybody. I'm not putting everybody into this, category that has risen to the top, but a lot of people who have risen to the top are kind of mentally unwell. Like they might be obsessive compulsive or ego driven, or they live for the star and their ego and their identity is tied to that. And if they lose it, it's like they're worthless, you know? And it's just like, is that healthy? But now to your point earlier, like when you got started in the industry, like that was your goal. That was where you wanted to be. And I feel like it's almost like the media gets a hold of this and we're in the business of transporting people and creating false realities. That's what we do. There's a facade that we create. You're not supposed to know the reality of what goes into creating that experience. And you as the consumer see that world, that dance we do, that facade we put up. And it's almost just like it pulls young people into this industry. And then when you get behind when you see behind the curtain, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with people, one chef in particular I worked with that I never saw him make a mistake once. I also never saw him smile once. He's deadly serious and an unbelievable technician and craftsman, but I mean, I don't know, maybe he would be able to answer that he is happy and that's just what he wants to do, and that's fine, and that works for the individual.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have the goals to kind of, set a star to kind of affix your path towards, because otherwise I think you can maybe get a little aimless and adrift. I think I sometimes struggle with identifying myself as what I do. I think a lot of people do. Defining yourself as the success of your stars or your pedigree, your reputation.
Got it.
I think it's very important for your long-term sanity to find what really is important and pursue that.
When did this happen for you? You said for you it was happiness or making people happy.
Yeah.
Right. When did you figure that out? That was what you love about this industry.
Well, I think I knew that pretty early on, which is what kind of got me into it in the first place. And then I think as you start to pursue, or as I started to pursue the fine dining route, I think maybe you kind of lose why you did it in the first place because there is so much work that goes into it. Maybe you lose a part of yourself and you forget why you did it. And I think stepping away from that world and getting into restaurants that didn't operate like that, like Chris and Page's, where people are treated a bit more respectfully, a little more like humans, and you're able to see the effect that your food has on people and bringing people together and making them happy.
When for you did you have to step away? Like when was this this point of reflection for you?
Well, it was at per se, yeah. We'd often have people come back into the kitchen after their meal to see the kitchen, say hello. It's kind of part of the dance, Sometimes they have the kitchen, the chef's
other
table
restaurants
in
from
there
all
now.
over the country come in.
Yeah. So we'd have people come in and they'd say hi. They take a photo with the chef and they'd leave. Say hi, take a photo with the chef, and they leave. And I almost felt like a tourist attraction. Like it was almost like folks were coming there to cross it off a bucket list. And I was working, 70, 80 hours a week, toiling, learning a lot, but boy, feeling the pressure, and then realized I sort of became disenchanted and disenfranchised with it, that I was just a bucket list thing that people were just checking off, and I was putting my entire life into it. And I think I kind of lost the plot a little bit, and I realized that I had to step away from it.
Yeah.
So.
We can bookmark that and come back to it because I don't want to get too far ahead of your come up. So passionate with food, fell in love, cooking with the family, watching TV, CIA. What was the biggest impact the CIA had on you, aside from meeting your wife?
That was probably a pretty big one, yeah. I would say it's really the connections that are available if you pursue them there. I think you can get by there with just kind of going to classes and graduating and not getting a whole lot out of your experience. But I think if you want to take full advantage of all the connections that place has to offer, I don't think there's any better place.
Yeah, I really do think that is the biggest benefit of going to, whether it be CIA or Johnson & Wales. It's the knowledge is valuable, don't get me wrong, but it's the network. And if you can prove yourself to those professors and you can grind and you can show them that you want it and you have it, they will open doors. They will get you in for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
It's how I got my first job out of school, and it's how I got to work with a really incredible pastry chef while I was there, Francisco Magoya, who's now, I think he's running the pastry program for Noma right now.
Is that what you wanted to do, pastry?
No, I did the savory kitchen program, but it was sort of like an after-school job there. They have the Apple Pie Bakery Cafe that is basically staffed by students of the class. So the first part of your classroom experience there is in the kitchen, and then you transfer up to the front of house, so you get to learn the back house and front of house of a cafe setting. And Chef Magoya ran the kitchen there.
Are you making a livable wage while working there?
No. Well, I mean, it's essentially a campus job, more or less. I think there were other campus jobs. I could have worked at the front desk of, the alumni office or at the rec center, which I did, and realized that I absolutely would never sit behind a desk.
Got it.
Ever. I can't do it.
What was the biggest way that this experience it transformed you today? Like, if you aside from the network and the connections,
it was just this. It was really the introduction to what the highest end world of cooking and restaurants and hospitality, the absolute height of professionalism. It was just a cafe on campus at a culinary school, but Chef Magoya ran it like a Michelin star kitchen. Yeah.
How did you feel as a student here?
How did I feel as a student?
So you had this vision, right, as a young high school kid, thinking about what it would be like when you got into the world of culinary. Like, were you living your dream, or?
It was exciting. I mean, it's still sort of anything is possible, and kind of seeing this world kind of open up for you was really, really exciting. I enjoyed my time at school, honestly. Made some great friends there. Even I went to the Culinary Institute with two of my best friends from high school, which is kind of
cool.
Crazy. But it was not something we had planned or said like, oh, where do you guys want to go? And we all went to the same place. We all just kind of decided to go at the same time, and they're still, lifelong great friends.
I
of
love
mine.
that. Was there debt associated with the culinary school?
Debt?
Yeah.
Some for sure. My parents helped me a little bit, but they didn't pay for all of it. So I applied for a lot of scholarships.
Nice.
And prioritized in my 20s paying off the loans.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's awesome.
So
CIA, you end up going back to New York.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where did you find yourself?
After CIA,
or you went from Hyde Park to New York City? What up, Unstoppables? I have a very special offer for you that could potentially change your life. So listen up. Restaurant Systems Pro wants to make 2025 your best year ever. And here's what they're going to do to help. When you sign up for Restaurant Systems Pro through February of 2025, they will do your books, your 2024 books for you at zero charge. Nothing to you, no cost to you to do your books. Plus, you're going to get all of the Restaurant Systems Pro profitability systems. So this is such a no-brainer deal. If you've heard of Restaurant Systems Pro in the past, listening to the podcast, and you've been interested, now is the time to sign up. Head to restaurantunstoppable.com/RSP or click the link below and make 2025 your best year ever.
Yes. So one of the culinary teachers instructors are called TAs there. His name was Matt Siciliano, Chef Matt Siciliano. He had worked with Jonathan Beno, who had owned Lincoln at the time, Lincoln Ristorante. And I think he was the one that I basically made the connection with, and that's kind of why I brought up connections as being the most important thing to me at CIA. And he basically kind of introduced me to Jonathan Beno, who happened to be doing a demo that day, a little seminar on campus. And then I ended up kind of working a program with Chef Beno where I was kind of going into Lincoln about once a month or so on the weekends to be an unpaid stagiaire or a trail. So I would go probably once every other month. I would say I would go down to Lincoln and just kind of keep the connection going because I'll be graduating in a year and I'm interested in working here, and that's what I did.
Nice.
But I'd go down, take the train down. I would sometimes sleep on my sister's couch who lived in Jersey across the river. Yeah.
So at this point, was the goal for you to be a restaurant owner, or did you just want to work in restaurants?
No, I think I wanted to be a restaurant owner. I think I wanted to own multiple restaurants, and without even really knowing what that really means and what that lifestyle is like. But yeah, my goal was to be a chef owner. That's my goal.
Did you have like a goal, like a date, an age, like a you know how the goals have to be smart? Was it time specific?
I want to say I had the goal of like doing it by the time I was 30 or something.
Well,
like
not
that.
too far off, man. You're 33 years old.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. So in your mind, what was the path to getting to ownership by the age of 30?
Grinding, working through as many restaurants as I could, learning as much as I could, and running somebody else's restaurant for a bit before doing it myself.
Right.
As I realized how much goes into it, I was like, I need to spend somebody else's money for a little bit before I
100%.
spend some of my own.
Yeah. I mean, before you go into massive debt and like figure it out, like, do I really want this life of running restaurants? So the path you took, from what I can see. So when did you graduate CIA?
Graduated CIA in the fall or winter of 2012.
2012.
Yeah.
So 3 years in New York.
Mm-hmm.
By 2015, you're in Portland, Maine. Why did you leave New York?
I think I had burnt out a little bit. I was pushing really hard. You kind of, when you're that fixed on a goal, it can become, I think, common to maybe stop taking care of yourself. And I kind of lost perspective a little bit, and I thought I wasn't going to cook anymore. If the high-end kitchens are going to just wear me down, I can't do it. So I'm going to do something else, maybe adjacent to the industry. I thought maybe I would be a sommelier. I've always had kind of interest in wine, and was fairly, I guess, okay at it at school because they have a wine training program at the CIA. And so I left New York because I knew Portland had this great food scene. Victoria and I had actually spent a long weekend up here in Portland. I think either when I was at Per Se or right before I started Per Se, and we had a meal at a new restaurant in town called Central Provisions.
Okay.
Yeah. They had just been open for a few months, and we sat at the counter, and Ken Oringer was seated right next to us. I had just done a trail at his restaurant, I think a year or so before that, Clio in Boston. I'd done a week there. So it was really kind of a cool experience. I watched the way Chef Chris Gould ran his kitchen. The food that we had was dynamite. and everyone seemed relaxed and was a little less fussy, but I had just as good of a meal.
I'm circling around Ken Oranger. I would love to get him on the show.
Chef Chris would probably be the one to talk to about that. I know he still talks to him.
Well, hey, so. Chef Chris is also open invitation. From what I understand, Paige is the one that handles the media.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's also fantastic. Very lucky to have her on the show. I do kind of want to unpackage this time at Per Se a little bit. So you were a year at Apple, what was it? Apple Pie?
The Apple Pie Cafe. Yeah, so about a year for 2011, 2012, I guess. A year. That's where I met Victoria.
At Lincoln Restaurante?
Then I was at Lincoln for 2 years.
2 years. So that's 3 years.
Well, Apple Pie Cafe is still up in Hyde Park.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on campus.
How many years were you at Per Se?
I was there for 9 months.
9 months.
9 months, which was kind of a big deal because it's you're supposed to do a year.
Yeah. So that was your goal. I mean, I think it's really cool that you had this vision, you had this goal. Was getting hired there hard for you?
I mean, it took a lot of legwork, I suppose. It's easy to say.
You had the network.
Right. And I had to kind of prove myself with Chef Benno, I think, is kind of what was the appeal for me for working for Chef Benno, because he had been running Per Se for about, I think, 5 or 6 years as a chef de cuisine as they opened. And I wanted to still work and learn from him in a slightly more relaxed setting. There's nothing relaxed about Jonathan Benno. He's a super serious, focused, talented guy. But it's, 1 star versus 3 stars, I guess. And I sort of saw it as a stepping stone to be able to get to Per Se. So I did tell him, I think about a year and a half in, I was like, Chef, I'd like to go up the street, down the street, I guess, 59th, 65th, sorry. And do that. And he said, I think you can do it. So, I had the opportunity, and he was super supportive, and he's like, I think, you should go. We'll figure it out here. We'll replace your position. And they did, as restaurants always do.
How much time do you think you should give a restaurant before leaving?
I mean, the bare minimum is 2 weeks. But this was a very open dialogue.
Well, that was a stage, right?
What do you mean?
Like, I'm talking about, you said 2 weeks. Like, I'm saying if you get hired at a restaurant.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry.
If you get hired, how much time do you think you should give a restaurant before going to another restaurant?
Sorry.
Not 2 weeks.
No, I mean, the standard is a year. The standard is a year. Yeah.
And you gave them more than a year, because you said it was a year where you were working with Chef Benno. Then you told him that's.
Yeah, I was about a year and a half. I'd been working for Chef Benno, and said that is my ultimate goal. I wasn't giving notice because all he had to do was say, "Don't hire this guy," and it would have shut that down. So.
I think there's definitely a lesson there to make your intentions known. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times people are afraid of what happens when you tell the truth. When you tell people what you want, and if what you want might not be in the best interest of the party you're telling, right? But when you set your intention, 9 times out of 10, unless the person you're working for is a complete D-bag, like, they're going to help you get to that place.
Right.
So by setting that intention, you can't manifest what you want in the world, in the universe, unless you don't put it into the universe. So you had the vision, you had the goal for yourself, but you also said out loud to somebody who could help you get there, this is what I want. And then from that point on, how did that relationship change?
He was very supportive. I think he kind of knew that that's what I really wanted to do. I don't know, kind of have I like fussy things. I like, I like to be really specific and work clean and technical. I just wanted to do everything right so that he would be able to be in a position to give me the blessing, I guess, to be able to.
Was your time there more intentional?
Time at Lincoln?
Yeah, from saying, putting this out?
I think it was, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think Per Se was kind of like the goal, and I started feeling when I got there, I was like, wait, now what?
Yeah.
But at Lincoln, I still had the goal, right?
Yeah. I think it's just so powerful to tell people, even if you're a business partner, you're going to work for somebody, right? And you say, I want to be a partner of yours someday, right? Like, put it out there. Once people know what your intentions are, that's I think that's what life does. I think all life has the ability to warp probability or influence probability. Like, it has a way of willing things, but we hold back sometimes. We're afraid to put it out there. So when you got to Per Se, your dream happened, but after 9 months, it was no longer a dream.
Yeah, I mean,
take us through that evolution emotionally, like from getting there to leaving.
I think I went from striving for something towards really trying to just not fail. And I think that's...
Were you afraid of failing? Was that something that was on the table?
Completely, yeah.
Why? What made you think that you could fail?
Well, I would see it, I guess, happen to other people. The turnover was really high. Kitchen is very, very intense. There's no talking. There's no music. Granted, there wasn't really any of that at Jonathan Beno's kitchen either, but it was just every day kind of felt like the Super Bowl. And there was sometimes a mantra like, today's the Super Bowl. Like, we get one shot at the person coming in here spending $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 a person to be perfect. People are expecting it to be perfect, and if it's not perfect, am I allowed to swear on the podcast?
Yeah.
If it's not perfect, it's fucking dog shit.
Yeah.
It's perfect or it's get out.
Yeah.
You know. So those were the stakes every day, and it felt like very perilous. Any mistake is perilous. It meant, you know, getting berated, yelled at, sent home, you know, and all I wanted to do was just not fail. And I think that was the wrong mentality to have. Looking back on it, I wish I had taken the same mentality I had at Lincoln of trying to succeed rather than trying not to fail. It seems like the same thing, but it's really not.
Well, when you get to your destination, you're working to get something. But when you get there, you're working to not lose it.
Right.
So I think that paradigm shift, you know, like it's like getting a star, right? You got it. Your dream came true. Now it's your nightmare. Because now you have to like keep it.
Right.
You know? I think it's a similar parallel. So, but how did you grow during this time? I mean, I don't want to make it all doom and gloom, but I'm sure you grew during this time.
So there were times where I felt like I was finally getting a rhythm, and I had a good relationship with maybe the sous chef I had been working with, and was starting to feel good. And then, you know, it would get hard again. It's a difficult place to work. Any place where you've got 3 stars is going to be a difficult place to work. It's a pressure cooker.
What was the hardest time for you?
Hardest time would well, I think it was just adapting to the workload, adapting to the stress.
Was there a specific time, a specific struggle where you look back at where you're like that, just like,
you know, every day was kind of like getting the prep list done felt insurmountable almost every day, where I had to, every minute of my day had to be completely planned and accounted for. And if I fell behind on one thing, I'm done. If I burn something, like, perish the thought. Like, if you're 5 minutes late on something, it's like, now you have to ask for help.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't handle the station. Why are you here? You know, so, you know, I'd be on a train or something going into work, and the train would stop underground and say, hey, a 10-minute delay. It's like, my day's ruined. Going into work before I even get there. I'm now 10 minutes behind on my list, and I'm at work that much.
How far of a train was it for
you? 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It really wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
But every day just felt so fraught with that tension and that stress. And some people, like I said, some people thrive on that. And part of me wishes I was that kind of person, but I don't.
And I think that's an important distinction to make. One thing I've learned that drove me crazy to get to this point to like figure this out is that there is no one path. There is no one way. As somebody who started a podcast who literally like shine a spotlight on the path to success in the restaurant industry, I couldn't find the path, because what you'd learn from one perspective and then you'd have a completely different perspective telling you, though, this is the way. And what I've learned is that there are a million different ways with a million different destinations and a million different types of hikers, you know, setting out on that path. So like, you have to pick the path that makes sense for you. Some people are better in a kayak, you know, like there is no way. And there are so many different types of people, you know? So for some people, that path is what they need and want, and they love it. They thrive in it, to your point.
Right.
What can you give me some more idea of like the economics of this type of restaurant? Like you said, $2,000, $3,000 per table, right? Per guest.
A-list celebrities coming in all the time, having their birthday parties.
How many
there.
seats?
Oh, geez, I think It's probably available online. It's probably like 50 or 60 seats.
How many turns in a night? 2?
It's usually like, I think like 2.5.
2.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we'd also have the parlor, the salon, I think it is. That's another 20 seats, and we opened that up for a la carte.
Okay.
So we were actually doing numbers that were higher guest-wise, number of reservations or number of people we served in a night that was much higher than they had done in years past, at least according to, for example, I talked to Matt Siciliano, the guy who introduced me to Benno. He had worked at 11 Madison and per se, and he'd said that they'd max out at 80 or 90 covers was it. That's all they would do. That was a lot, and we were doing 125 on a Friday, which 20%, 30% increase is not
$125,000.
No, I'm sorry, 125 people.
Oh, I was thinking. I was doing the math. I was like, it's about between 120 and 130 is where I was thinking, at an average of 2,000 per head.
I'm not sure what the check average was. I knew that I know the restaurant relies on wine sales for sure. There's so many bodies in that kitchen. The labor is
right.
They don't necessarily talk to the line cooks about the economics of it, but I do know that the wine program was so necessary for that restaurant model, that type of restaurant.
So they're doing about 24,000 a night. Is that
20? I mean, at least I think.
Yeah,
way more than that.
To play it safe, right? Like I don't know. Like I'm not the best. We can break out. Please back me up with a calculator. But I think one thing that you have to keep in mind.
I think it's probably closer to like 50.
Probably 50.
100.
I don't even want to know what the rent is. So you think the first thing you're like, oh well, they're in New York City. They're probably paying close to 20, if not more, 30,000 a month for rent, right?
Yeah.
So you got to factor that in. But I guess where I'm going with this is like, I get that world, but at the same time, I really encourage people not to like aspire to that world.
Right. It's such a specific business model. And like I said, they don't, as a line cook, they're not talking to you about really the economics of it. And that was very much kind of a closed off world, unless I was probably, going to work my way up to being a sous chef or chef de cuisine or something, which I knew I was not going to do. That world was going to be closed off to me, but I knew that it's a very, very specific business model that's usually not available to most people. You need
and I think that's the other
wealthy
thing.
Partners to get that started. It's millions to open restaurants like that.
They're serving the top 1% of the 1%. They're in New York City, and only 1% of the people in New York City can afford to eat there, right? So I think you really have, and I think when we, as young people, so many people see that and they say, that's what I want. But do you? And I really point my finger at media. I think marketing, when I say things like marketing is the bane of human existence, this is what I mean. Because all the Michelin stars are
your marketing majors.
I know, and that's what I went into it like you were when you were bright-eyed and hopeful,
right.
And then you start going into things, and you're like, this is like the world of media and marketing is just really manipulation and controlling the narrative and the agenda, and there's a mile-wide gray area in the world of marketing, you know? But I think that media that just gets a hold of these things, like the Michelin star, all that is marketing. Mm-hmm. James Beard, it's marketing, I think. Correct me if you think.
It totally is. I also think, not to go on a totally different tangent, but we're seeing with media almost the homogenization of style. So many restaurants, I think, look like other restaurants who look like other restaurants who are trying to put, I think, after like the Scandinavian food movement of you had like Favakins and Nomas and stuff, suddenly everyone was doing the perfect dollop quenelle, and then like 1 inch away is one protein on the plate, and that was it, kind of thing. And you see that now, everyone does that.
Right.
I think media has kind of opened up to a little bit of sameness, and I think we kind of miss a little bit more variety with everyone trying to execute a specific ideal of what my food should look like so it's Instagrammable. But I will say the counter to, I guess, blaming everything on the media and the marketing, I think from, as a cook, there's something kind of intoxicating or captivating about the idea of perfection. How far can I push myself in this pursuit to what might be the idea of perfection, and then you realize that perfection's not actually real, and that's absolutely
or
maddening.
achievable.
It's maddening.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you for going into this. So you decide 9 months. At 9 months, what happened for you to say, I've gotten my experience, I reached my destination, and I'm ready to deboard this train?
Yeah, I think. Well, it wasn't to me. It wasn't really a triumphant thing. I think it was sort of like a tail between my legs kind of moment. I was maybe ashamed, I guess, of myself that I wanted to at least do a year.
Did you quit or did you get fired?
No, I didn't get fired. I quit. I was having panic attacks going into work. I was a zombie, and Victoria was like, I can't do this. This isn't really fair to me. And she's like, I don't even think it's fair to you. I think you need to get out of this. This is not, you're not enjoying this. You're even when I was at home, I was not at home. I was thinking about my out of place sets for the next day, which is, I guess this is a better answer for the thing that you're thinking about before when you're asking if there's one specific thing. Out of place sets. Now that I bring that up, unpack this trauma.
What is an out of place set?
Out of place set. So one of the things about the tasting menu is that everyone got something. No ingredient was repeated once during the menu. So when you're having 9+ courses, not including all the extra snacks and mignardises, no one ingredient is going to be repeated. So if there's corn on the salad, you cannot have corn on the steak set. So we would never just replace one ingredient with another on any plate. If someone said, actually, I don't like corn, that person needed to have a whole new dish to put out just for that one person. Or maybe you have a few of those in your back pocket for someone. And suddenly it becomes this game of you're kind of jockeying for position with the fish guy who's like, oh, no, I have leeks on my out-of-place set. You can't have leeks on your out-of-place set.
Oh, man.
And it would come to you and say, okay, this person's spending $500 here just for food and, what's your out-of-place set? They can't have that. I said, Chef, I'm going to do this. And they said, no, you're not. What else are you going to do? I don't know. I have nothing. And then you're in the crosshairs and you need to have a dish that's good enough in the moment to be able to pull out as a line cook.
Right.
Which was like very, very challenging.
I mean, how did that make you feel?
Panicked all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm listening to that too. And from what I've learned about like just the economics of a restaurant, like that's just not good, like restaurant economics either. In terms of like, if you're not serving the top 1% of the 1%, you don't have a huge budget for cost of goods. Mm-hmm. You can literally get your hands on anything you want. Your walk-in's huge. Like you probably have all these things to choose from, right? Most restaurants can't do that. They have that's why Mexican restaurants make a ton of money, because it's the same 10 ingredients or 5 ingredients 20 different ways. Like it's efficient, you know, like it's that's profitable, you know?
Yeah. So anyway. I would spend all my time like thinking about out of place sets. What am I going to do? I could do the Brussels sprouts. Oh no, this Brussels sprouts on fish. And I just sit there staring at the ceiling going crazy.
So you quit 9 months
So we quit. I gave my notice. I gave my 2 weeks notice. And the chef de cuisine kind of scowled at me and said, you haven't even been here for a year. And I knew he was going to say that. I said, yes, I know. I'm very sorry. He says, if you haven't been here a year, you're dead to me. He threw in a few choice words with it as well. And I said, okay. And he said, I'm going to give you like another night to think about this, basically. So like, really make sure this is what you want to do. And which I was like, it rubbed me the wrong way. So I came in the next day. I didn't want a no call, no show. I came in the next day. I shook his hand and say, I'm done. And I walked out.
Oh man.
Yeah. And I knew there was another, we happened to be like overstaffed that day, which never happens. And it almost felt like this sign from the universe that like, if you're going to do this, like this is the day to do it.
Yeah.
So, I knew that they were going to be fine on staff. And I was just, for him to have that response to me, just be like, if you haven't been here, you're fucking dead to me. I'd be like, okay, then fuck you too. I'm out. So that's how I left.
So that was 2014 or 15?
That was 2015, yeah.
And then you come back to New Hampshire?
No, we went right to Portland. I took a job at Aldea, which was George Mendez's restaurant. I don't even know if it's still there. I think he's in Boston now. But a friend of mine had been working there, sort of a part-time thing. Was doing like expo, food running, just something until we were ready to move to Maine, because Victoria was actually at Lincoln this whole time. We'd worked together at Lincoln for a while. She was working under Richard Capizzi, phenomenal late pastry chef. He passed away a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And so she was finishing her time with him. And then we moved up to Maine, and I started at Hugo's.
Okay.
So doing front of house.
So you weren't at the first restaurant,
Aldea.
not long.
No, it was only 3 months. It was
Okay.
always meant to be like a temporary thing. I had a friend there.
Yeah. So
needed some
why
hands.
Portland, Maine?
Well, there was still this idea in my head of that meal that I'd had at Central Provisions, of this fantastic food, great food scene in the city, without all that intensity and that pressure. And I thought, I love being by the ocean. I am a little closer to home. It's something a little bit smaller that I can get my teeth into. New York is so huge. It never felt like mine. You know, I always felt like a tourist in the place I lived.
Yeah.
So
you were at you came to Portland in 2015. You were at Hugo's for how long?
I was at Hugo's, I think almost 3 years. I think it was almost 3 years, like 2.5 years.
Okay.
At Hugo's.
I mean, I had Arlen Smith on the show twice, actually. Really enjoy speaking with Arlen. What was this experience like relative to what you were used to?
It was like a breath of fresh air. They actually had to get me to calm down a little bit because I was still bringing that like intensity. I got pulled aside by someone who became their HR director and is actually one of the first contacts I made in Maine. She's actually still a very good friend of mine. She and her husband, Caitlin and Graham Miller. And I realized like halfway through the conversation, it was like, I'm kind of getting yelled at right now really nicely. It's just kind of like, maybe tone it down a little bit because you're throwing things at people and all these things that I had
What'd you
seen.
get hired as?
As expediter,
Okay.
kitchen expediter. Yeah. So I was kind of the air traffic control where tickets come in, I call it out to the kitchen, send it out. It felt like they felt like it was a good gap to bridge from my back house experience to front of house, which I'd kind of said, I'm done with cooking. I'm burnt out, never again. Here we are now. But it made sense at the time. I actually really enjoy expediting. I enjoyed that job. And the Big Tree hospitality group I think it was a really good place to get into after, because particularly, I guess for our land, it's all about the hospitality. It's all about the guest. And that felt right.
Yeah.
So
is this where you started to realize what you love in the industry?
Yeah, I think, I got to be able to connect with people. It's a completely open kitchen at Hugo's. It was a little bit, I appreciated so much that it was a bit of a change of pace because I needed to take my foot off the gas for sure, because I just burnt myself out is really what I did. So it's a little slower in the winter season for sure up here. But even in the summer, it didn't have that level of focus and intensity and spotlight the way every day is a Super Bowl like it is at per se.
Right.
So it was really good for me to, I think, be in that kind of environment.
Balance.
Yeah. Still doing great food, but without that,
So finding balance
perilousness
was one way you grew. How else did you grow?
I think it's really just taking time to gain perspective. I think was really big for me. Like I said, with just foot on the gas, I didn't even realize how much I wasn't taking care of myself and my own mental health. And I was so fixated and focused on the idea of perfection and this goal. And if I let myself down, that I'd be a failure. And I think taking that time to gain perspective is something I still make sure I take time to do.
Yeah.
Because I can lose the plot so easily when I easily fixate on stuff and I think
forget. I think in your 30s is a good time to open a restaurant. Because if you're making it a goal, I mean, if you do a 2-year program, 18 to 20, right? There's a lot of 2-year culinary programs. Mm-hmm. You can get the door open for you by going through those programs and doing the networking. And you give yourself 1 year at different types of restaurants, not even like all like full service, but like different business models. Go spend a couple of years at a franchise, and like learn the other side of the business, mm-hmm. like the systems and processes and volume, and like just drink from a fire hose and try to get as much perspective as possible. And you will learn so much about yourself in that process of getting that perspective. It's invaluable.
Huge.
Yeah. So when you came to Portland, was the goal to open a restaurant in Portland? Was that like kind of the end game for you?
I don't think I had a specific goal. I think I needed to find myself a little bit. I think I needed to kind of tap into why I got into this industry in this first place, and I did. I was able to do that because I totally had lost the plot. So I think within a year, I kind of had that notion pop up again, that I almost had like unfinished business, that I needed to try this again.
Yeah.
With a new perspective.
So did you end up getting back into the kitchen at Hugo's or Eventide or Honey Pot?
I didn't, no. I was the expediter, and then I kind of became floor manager, and then eventually I became the general manager there. So I was a little bit more involved with the kind of administrative stuff, and also.
Were you looking for that general manager role?
I think part of me I kind of always sort of gravitate to just wanting to do more, and I feel like that's kind of eventually becomes one of the next steps or the last steps in a restaurant in the hierarchy. So I think it's kind of a natural progression. But I think it's been about a year and a half or 2 years that I was in the front house before they made me the general manager.
What was that transition to general manager like for you?
It's pretty seamless, pretty natural. I almost feel like.
How did they set you up for it?
I had kind of like a running start. I had Caitlin, who had become the HR director, was still there, and I could still talk to her. She had been the general manager before me. Arlen was there all the time. Andrew, Mike, all those guys were there all the time. So the support system, the structure was kind of already in place. So it was really just a matter of executing their vision. It was a vision I agreed with, so it was, it's very easy, I guess, in that regard to do.
Yeah.
Because I believed in what we were doing.
What work were you doing now that you never did before?
Now, here in this role in Hugo's?
Yeah, as general manager.
I think a little bit more just of the administrative stuff, scheduling, ordering, making, like the bookkeeping, doing data entry and reporting to accounting and stuff like that. So it's just more big picture stuff, I guess.
Was this the first time you ever were open to the economics?
Yes. It was, and it was the first time owners had been open with me about it, which I really appreciated, because everywhere else I had been, it was very closed kimono.
And this is what, 2018?
2019.
Kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah, I think this is changing in the industry right now. I think open book management is becoming more common, much more common. This idea of, sharing KPIs with the team from, general manager down to server. Mm-hmm. Like, this is what we're doing for numbers. And I think when people understand the game of business, they are able to see their job and their role in their job different. They know the impact they have on the bottom line. Right. It all makes sense. It all comes together.
Suddenly it doesn't feel like, why am I doing this?
Right.
There's a direct reason and a correlation to something.
So was there any struggle with that transition to the numbers, or have you always kind of been good with this sort of thing?
Not that I specifically recall. It never, it's sort of a learning curve with anything, but it wasn't particularly daunting or challenging.
Yeah.
But it was kind of in that time I was starting to get the itch to cook again. I was going home and I was reading cookbooks at night, and I was cooking elaborate meals at home, and really just kind of felt that I needed to cook again.
Yeah.
And had that idea at Central in particular, the meal that made me kind of move to Portland in the first place, which is such a trip because they're business partners now. So.
Right. That is crazy. Why were you trying to get a job at Central Provision when you came to Portland?
No, I didn't even apply.
Really?
Yeah.
Why not?
Because I didn't want to cook. I was so
right.
I was so burnt out, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna. Hugo's was hiring for an expo, and I was like, well, that's kind of the perfect blend of like trying to transition from the back house into front house. I already know how the system works.
Great organization, well regarded.
Yeah.
So when were you starting to think I need to move out of Big Tree Hospitality, Hugo's, Eventide, and Honey Pot?
The itch to cook, I think, was just there too much, and I always really liked the food that they were doing at Central. I always really admired what they were putting out, and it just excited me. And I knew they were doing. It was a different environment than the tasting menu, which Hugo's was tasting menu kind of only, and I'd been doing the tasting menu game in New York, and I liked the idea of doing something a little more eclectic, more small plates, more dynamic. So then I did a trail at Central, and I really liked it. I liked the way it felt. It just, I don't know, sometimes.
Do you call it a trail? A trial?
A trail.
Trail. How's that different than a stage?
It's not really. I think stage is shorthand for the French word stagiaire.
Yeah.
I I guess stagiaires are kind of have the connotation of being a longer residency. Maybe it's a week or a month or something like that. But they're pretty interchangeably used, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So any other parts of the story that are worth coming up before getting on board with Central Provision?
No. I mean, Victoria and I were still together, and we ended up getting married in our backyard while I was working with Hugo's. And we had Graham, who was actually the chef de cuisine at Eventide. Graham Miller, Caitlin's husband, was the chef at Eventide at the time, and they catered the wedding in our backyard. It was the best food you've ever had at a wedding anywhere.
That's the way it should be done.
It's pretty cool.
Me, personally, I think you did it right. So, okay.
That's about it. So we're married at this point, and yeah, I'm moving to Central.
So I think Victoria's a big part of the story, right? She's your business partner today, life partner today. What was she doing during all this? Was she in construction during this time?
So she had done construction all through high school, and even actually a year into us working in New York, I was going in, taking the train down to Lincoln, and she was going to work on jobs in Greenwich, Connecticut.
And you met her in college at CIA?
At CIA at the Apple Pie Cafe. She was a student while I was kind of the additional hands that
was
they
she
would sometimes
studying
hire.
culinary?
She was studying baking and pastry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she didn't take that path until later.
Yeah, a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah. So, she, I don't know. Yeah, I think it was kind of always her goal. I mean, I guess she could tell you specifically at the time if it was her goal, but the money in construction is pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, I think that probably had something to do with it. And then there was this opportunity for a pastry position at Lincoln with Richard Capizzi, who is really outstanding pastry chef. And so she kind of decided to jump in at that time.
When she came to Maine with you, when you came here together, what was she doing when she got here?
She took the role of the pastry chef at the Regency Hotel.
Okay.
Yep.
And how long was she there?
I think it might have been just a bit less than a year.
Okay.
It wasn't really what she was looking for, going from, they at Lincoln, they had contracts with the Brooklyn Botanical Garden doing stunning, 5-foot tall wedding cakes.
Yeah.
Like, that would just blow you away. And all the desserts for the Metropolitan Opera. And it's also Richard Capizzi, so it's the standard is it's perfect. It's perfection. He's an unbelievable craftsman.
So I know that she ended up being the general manager at Tipo.
Yep. So she went to she managed she took a pastry chef job, sort of a lateral move at first from the Regency to a place in Cape Elizabeth called Sea Salt.
Got it.
As a gourmet market and sort of cafe, and she became pretty quickly the general manager there without training and whipped the place into shape. She's just one of those people that is really naturally good at like everything she does. Sometimes it can be frustrating. But I admire her and so much, and I'm very proud of her.
It's a good business partner right there.
She's
a life partner too.
She's the best.
So I guess you joined Central Provision. Why leave Hugo's? What was going on? So there was no opportunity for you in the kitchen at Hugo's?
I think there may have been, but they already had a chef de cuisine. They already had a sous chef. So to me, the upward mobility didn't seem to be there, and I felt like if I was going to get back into cooking, it was going to be to manage a kitchen. It was going to be my goal.
So when did you join Central Provision?
It would have been, I think, July of 2018, I think.
Okay. And you were with them, technically still you're partners with them today, right?
Yeah.
So 6 years working with them, 6 years.
Yeah.
How did you grow during this time? When you joined them, were you starting to get closer to this idea of I want to open my own place? Because you said that was a goal.
For sure. I think so. Yeah, I think I did my best cooking at Central because I was cooking again, I think, with the goal of just make great food, make myself proud, use good technique, and I didn't have that fear there that I did when I was at Per Se. Of the fear of failure wasn't really there. I just wanted to cook because I really can't shake the fact that I love cooking, and I cooked really well as a result. I think not playing head games with myself was important, and also the staff that we had there was kind of this like golden age. I don't know. It's like, you ever work on a team and you kind of have to tell the people that you're working with, this doesn't happen all the time. It's not usually this good, where everyone respects each other, front of house, back of house. We all have each other's backs. We're all working towards the same thing in unison, and it really felt like this kind of magic synergy. And that kind of happened for a time, for a year plus, when I was there at Central.
What was it about Central that made this culture possible? Dive into how they built that.
I think Chef Chris and Paige had is a culmination of years of setting these standards in place, and this is what we're looking for. And it's having a team that you can coach and manage and inspire to achieve that. And I think we totally had that. It was a team full of team players, and that were really good.
Get into the how of how they coached, how they inspired.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we had team meetings at least once a week, particularly in the kitchen. They gave us a lot of freedom and leeway to make decisions, while also still enforcing the standard, I guess. And the standards were really clear. I think that sometimes makes it easy, even if the standard is high. As long as it's clear, it's a lot easier to hit, rather than if it's kind of wishy-washy.
So how do they enforce standards? How would they go about enforcing standards?
I think, you ever heard the phrase kind of management by walking around?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Chef Chris had just kind of, through time, through example, he's the kind of guy that can walk into the kitchen and everyone stands up a little straighter and cleans up their boards. And I think his just presence of being there and being consistent, it really sets the tone. It sets the example for how everyone ought to be in the kitchen. And it wasn't through fear. I never saw him like screaming at people. Although I heard he used to be, a little more intense in his younger days, but he's got his daughters now, and he's, I think he's realized he doesn't have to do that anymore. And people, I think, respond better to a little more level-headed. You can be serious, it can be professional, but it doesn't have to be that old school level of leading by fear, which is how it used to be for a long time.
Yeah, you also taught me, you didn't use these words, but like freedom to kind of create and do your own thing. I wrote down long leash.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that's important to have this space?
Well, you're giving people who are already naturally ambitious autonomy, and I think people who are naturally ambitious are looking to make decisions, and they feel gratified and rewarded from the ability to make their own decisions. So if you give people that flexibility, they don't feel so confined. They're not going to be looking for the door. They say, okay, I have the freedom to play in this sandbox under these rules, under this standard, and then they can execute. So
yeah, if you have a high standard, if you have a high standard for good people, let them be good people. Give them that space to blossom into their potential. And I think you benefit as the owner when you have that level of perspective under why not open yourself up to that voice, that mm-hmm. talent, that passion, and be better together.
Right. One thing we found at Finestkind is it's such a small team. I find myself taking on a lot. But I think if you have enough people with you, in the case of Central, it's a fairly large team. You can delegate and trust in people as long as the standard is clear and you hold people to the standard, which they've always done. Chris and Paige have always done very well and very respectfully and professionally. And I think it's probably easier on the chef owner for them to not have to do everything themselves. Trust in people.
What up, Unstoppables? I have a very special offer for you that could potentially change your life. So listen up. Restaurant Systems Pro wants to make 2025 your best year ever. And here's what they're going to do to help. When you sign up for Restaurant Systems Pro through February of 2025, they will do your books, your 2024 books for you at zero charge. Nothing to you, no cost to you to do your books. Plus, you're going to get all of the Restaurant Systems Pro profitability systems. So this is such a no-brainer deal. If you've heard of Restaurant Systems Pro in the past, listening to the podcast, and you've been interested, now is the time to sign up. Head to restaurantunstoppable.com/RSP or click the link below and make 2025 your best year ever. What was the weekly meeting like? You said you would meet weekly. What would you cover?
We'd cover
Do you know the
new dishes
format?
we'd want to do, what's coming into season, general housekeeping. What do we have a lot of in the walk-in that we want to make into a special? How is this new person doing on this station? How is, what are the pressure points? What are, and we'd
Was
usually sit for
everybody,
about an
was it
hour
all
and a
hands on deck?
half. We'd usually have a full team, front of house and back of house, about once a month. Front of house would always have their own meetings. Back of house would meet once a week. It was usually about an hour and a half. And it was great, like mutual respect among all the managers. And I think that was kind of the big thing. His chef de cuisine at the time was Eddie Moreau. And I think I just think he's a great leader as well, kind of followed in Chef Chris's example of leading by example and being respectful.
Were KPIs discussed?
Not really.
Okay.
No.
How did you grow the most during this time?
Well, just through, time and experience, I think there's really no beating it. I think we face a bunch of different problems every day as managers that you kind of find what works and what doesn't. So I think definitely having that experience, it was good. You find the way to manage people, the way not to manage people. And also I got to cook, like actually just cook with a team that I loved cooking with and bouncing ideas off of. So I think it was great for my own perspective of the industry and helped remind me why I wanted to do it.
So 2024, September, you open your restaurant. The goal was for summer of 2024.
Yeah.
When did the conversation of we doing this? Like, when did that start to happen?
It's kind of started between Victoria and I, because Victoria was now at Tipo. She'd moved on from Cape Elizabeth, and now she's, at this point, she's in...
Tipo is one of the 3 restaurants under the Hugo's. Or it would have been 2, because this is the 3rd.
Tipo is Central and Tipo. So Fineskind's the 3rd. So
Yes.
you said Hugo's.
Yeah.
My own.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Sorry. So she was at Tipo. She started doing the wine program for both. Paige helped, Victoria with her sommelier certification. Victoria's got a great palate. It's better than mine. It's, again, she's just naturally good at everything. And so she's also very meticulous, very organized. So she's at Tipo, and we both kind of realized we had the skill set. We felt like Victoria and I had the skill set to be able to do this on our own. And I feel like, to come this far in the industry, to completely work through our 20s, I knew for me it was always going to be something that I would wonder about if I didn't try to open my own restaurant.
Yeah. So when did the conversation start?
So the conversation, I think, to tell you the truth, so I had left Central at the end of 2020. I was gone for a couple of years. I had somebody reach out to me about opening a brewery in Portland, and I wanted the experience of opening a restaurant. So the idea, I guess, was always there. I was there for 2 years. It felt a bit, it's part of a larger corporate company, and it never really felt right. So Chef Chris had reached back out again at that point, and asked if I wanted to come back, and I said I did, but I want to open my own restaurant. So I will come back and work with you. I miss you guys a lot. But it's going to be under the notion that I want to have my own place. And Chris and Paige had started talking to us about maybe taking partnership in Central and Tipo. And that was obviously very, very enticing, because we have loved working for them. There's a reason I came back to work for them. Love the company, and our values align. But I also knew that Central and Tipo were always going to, even if we had partnership, it was always going to be their restaurant. And that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me, to tell you the truth. I needed to have my own.
Yeah.
And we, had to do it with Victoria too, because she fills in all the gaps of my shortcomings, I guess, in terms of being able to manage the books, and she's a level head when I'm a little bit kind of all over the place. So, and also we would never see each other. True. Too.
Right.
So, we wanted to be able to see each other. We wanted to be able to work towards something together. We knew we had worked together and could work together from our time at Lincoln.
So it started as, you came back again, you set your intention.
Yep.
You said, this is what I want. This is what I'm working towards. You at that time, you didn't say, I want to be a partner in your restaurant. You said, I'm working towards opening my own restaurant. So like, I'll come back and work with you, but know that I'm actively looking to do my own thing.
Right.
They responded in, well, why don't you do something with us? You can have equity in one of our businesses. And you said no.
And Central and Tipo, right, which was very, very difficult. We struggled on that for weeks.
Yeah. So at first, were you like, yeah, let's do that, and then the more you chewed on it, the more you realized you wanted your own baby.
Yeah, exactly. So we had, I don't know what level of seriousness we had started looking, I guess, in 2023. We had maybe looked at some spaces, walked through some spaces. And one important thing for us is that we wanted to own whatever restaurant we went into, we wanted to own the real estate. We had seen so many people taking on enormous loans, building out spaces, and then they don't own them. And if you're not cash flow positive, then at the end, I guess, what do you have? You don't have necessarily IP. You have the chef, who's often the identity of a restaurant. If the chef's not there, how many times has a chef left a restaurant and the restaurant's just not the same?
Right.
So it's such we wanted to have some kind of equity, I guess. And unless we were kind of going for a cash flow positive, franchisable sort of model, it was important for us to have the real estate, which narrowed the available restaurants to us for sure.
So you purchased this building, or the whole building, or this unit?
This building.
Okay.
It's a one unit, single unit. But
Yeah.
So we looked at a couple different places. There's a place in Gorham we looked at, but it didn't work to meet the SBA standards for getting a loan.
Do you know the SBA standards?
Well, in particular for the SBA 504 program, the restaurant or the business that they're financing, if they're going to help you with the real estate, has to be 51% of the square footage of that building.
I didn't know that. I know you need at least a 680. You need to be in business for a certain amount of time too, don't you?
Not for the 504.
Oh,
It can be the plant or the building or the restaurant can be considered,
You can't have any other debt with the government or the Small Business Administration, I think.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. You can't have other loans out with them, and we
can't have a criminal record.
We don't have a criminal record. Try to keep my hands clean.
Yeah. I think also, the benefits of having partners in Paige and Chris is that they have that track record too.
Yeah.
So now they have established relationships with the banks. So you can kind of use that to would you have gotten that loan, do you think, if you didn't have them as partners for this building?
I think it made us a lot more attractive to those lending institutions. I think they were pretty, I don't say iffy or on the fence about loaning to us. I got that there's almost a sense of hesitancy when we were going through the process. And as soon as we had, because we had gone fairly far into the process, we actually let Chris and Paige know that we are turning down the partnership and we're under contract for this building. But as soon as people, the bank, for example, knew that they were part of it, it suddenly felt like, oh, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
Yeah.
Just having them on board.
Well, it's that relationship.
Totally.
Right? There's something there for sure. And, to give Paige and Chris credit too, I think I think what you did is the way you grow and scale a business. You attract onto yourself talent, right? You become successful, you create opportunity for others. You know that if you don't provide more opportunity to those others, those ambitious, talented people, they're going to go on and find it without you, with or without you, right? They made you an offer. You had a different plan, right? And I think when restaurant owners think of finding a 50-50 partner or whatever it is that you guys landed on, it's like, I'm giving up 50% of that business, but you're gaining 50% of a business you otherwise wouldn't have bandwidth for. You know, they have they have your values, right?
Yeah.
You have their systems and processes and operational.
Yeah.
Right?
So much of what we do is here is the same as we do it at Central.
Literally groomed you.
Yeah.
Who else is a better partner?
I know it.
And I don't think you can, and to your point, I think you need skin in the game. You need that identity, that sense of ownership to show up the way you need to show up to be successful. You can't hire. So I'm listening to this book right now, Main Street Millionaire, by Cody Sanchez. And, she talks about like how there's all these like boomers about to retire, and there's these like Main Street businesses all over the place that are like that the next generation doesn't want to take over. And it's basically about how to go in and to take over a business basically with no money down. You know, she kind of coaches you through that. And a big part of what she also says never buy a restaurant.
The track record across the board is not great. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But there's some really great advice in that book on how to set up those deals. And, you know, she recommends going into a situation where if you have a restaurant or a business, she says no restaurants, a business that's profitable, you just split the profit until you pay off the value of the business, right?
Yeah.
But this is a different scenario. I mean, I don't know how privy you are to get into the details of your arrangement, but like, what advice do you have? Like this is where I think we don't talk enough. Is like, how do you get into those partnerships, and how do you structure those partnerships in a way that are win-win?
Yeah. Well, for us, Chris and Paige had made us, the offer of partnership, and basically the money that they had earmarked or the distribution that was going to be due to us upon taking that partnership was basically repurposed into what if we invested in you guys, because this is going to take a lot of money. And they were right. We needed them, honestly. This restaurant would not be what it was without their mentorship and that additional capital to get it started.
So they're strictly financial partners?
No, I wouldn't say it's strictly financial. I mean, they were here for our first week or two while we were opening, helping us getting our POS and our systems up in place. Chef Chris helped me organize the kitchen. I still bounce ideas off of him all the time. We still talk about food, about cooking, about what's working, what doesn't. Chef, I'm running into this problem. How did you solve that problem when you were in my position? And it's a really kind of invaluable resource. So I think we're so much better off for having taken their partnership and having them on.
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, this is typically where I ask, how'd you get the money, right? Because that's a big challenge for a lot of people. And you got the money.
So we had basically our own money that we brought into it that we saved. Like I said, we kind of worked through our 20s.
Backyard wedding.
Backyard wedding, man. Yeah,
Don't spend stupid money on a wedding if you want to open a restaurant.
No, we had we made money on our wedding, actually, which is crazy. We
Is that because you worked for Hugo's?
Oh yeah, we earned more, and we did like some like work in kind, like we traded labor for labor kind of sort of thing. But yeah, I think we've just kind of always prioritized saving, which is big. If you're gonna do something like this, you do have to have skin in the game. The bank is not going to give you money unless you're putting some money in yourself.
What advice do you have for saving? Were you putting aside 10% of every dollar you're earning or something like that?
In particular, no. I think we're just really, there was no percentage in mind. We're just really disciplined about it.
What we don't need.
And we invested. True. Frankly, I think we got a little bit lucky, although it's one of those things where like the more good decisions you make, the better luck you have.
Compound
kind of thing,
yeah.
Right?
How did we start this episode? What was the quote?
The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. Right. Yeah. We had bought a small house in Scarborough, and then we had no idea what the housing market was going to do.
Oh, right.
That it did. And basically we refinanced that house and took out a portion of it and used that as the down payment for the restaurant.
Yeah. How much money did you come up? Like, what was the number you needed to hit to make this happen?
For us, I mean, of our own money, it's about $100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the total amount that you needed to make it happen?
And including like the bank's contribution overall?
Yeah.
We're probably looking a little under. It's like 650, 700.
It's still not that bad if you own the building.
Correct. Right.
So you own the building, you put $100,000 of your own money in, so you had to come up with $500,000 $150,000.
Right. So, I mean, it's essentially a mortgage. So a lot of places pay rent and then they pay off whatever portion of their loan.
You put your house on the line to back the loan.
Yeah, more or less. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not upside down on it. You know,
Yeah.
we have, it's equity that we have in it. So,
Yeah. But only one financial investor, i.e.
it's us. Yep. And then we worked with Bangor. Is basically Bangor Savings was phenomenal.
Now, did Paige and Chris put their own money in, or did they just go in on the? Okay.
They did, yeah. So they used that money and bought their percentage, I guess,
Okay.
of the business.
I love that. Are you willing to talk about like how to structure an agreement like that in terms of like how to pay it back? Are your goals to pay them off eventually and own it outright, or do you want to keep them as partners? This is where it gets weird.
Yeah, no, I think this is the kind of thing where it's like there's no substitute for time. There's no substitute for developing that relationship. It's easy to say, oh, well, somebody gave you money, but it's like, but also these are people that you find people that you trust, that you work with really well and have put in years of your professional life with.
And is this it for you?
This restaurant?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. If you asked me that like 5 months ago, I would have said like, yeah, I'm never doing this again. But we're starting to find a rhythm. Our real focus right now is making this place the best place it can be.
Right. I think where I was going with that is when you have partners, now you have successful business partners, right?
So,
and what can the four of you do?
Yeah.
Coming together and finding lanes, What were you going to say?
Victoria is still technically an employee of theirs as well as partners. She still does their wine program at Central Provisions and at Tipo. And I don't necessarily think it's our goal to buy them out, at least not right now. I like having them with us. I can call them anytime with questions, or if I need mentorship or support, I still call Chef Chris Chef, and I'm never going to not call him Chef.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we're partners now. I'm not going to call him Chris.
Yeah.
I can't. It's weird. So I really like having them on our team, and I think we'll probably all go farther together, So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the only way to scale a business today. I think the days of sole restaurateur or sole proprietor restaurateur, because of what you have to be good at today to be the best, it's more competitive than ever before. It's more, I think you have to do more to be relevant than ever before in terms of marketing and, like restaurants are like real businesses today, HR, all these things the world is changing and restaurants are being forced to evolve with the standards of society, and I think, to really be the best, you need people who are strong where you're weak, and to attract onto yourself the best, i.e. the Toms and Victorias, they want skin in the game. They want ownership. So the only way to get the best talent today, and people are smarter. That's the other thing. Like, people are educated. They know the only way you build wealth is with assets. So the only way to go ahead, especially in the restaurant industry, because it's so hard, we weed people out in this industry, to show up the way you need to show up to be the best in this industry, you have to be in it. You have to have skin in the game. That's the only way, in my opinion, you get the best.
I totally agree. I think, aligning your not just values, but the rewards. So you're both aligned in your interests, I guess, is huge. I think that's kind of maybe the only way to do it long term.
Right.
Especially when you have people who are ambitious,
Right. So what were the biggest challenges for you? So 2023, you found the space.
Yeah, we did a walkthrough 2023. They wanted too much money for it. Visitor.
Yeah.
2023, we did a walkthrough of the space. It was too expensive. We offered something lower. They balked at us. We said, okay, never mind. We hadn't heard from. We walked away thinking that was it. And then a few months later, almost towards the end of 2023, near Thanksgiving time, they're having a tough time selling it, and he really wanted to sell it. They're starting to get more motivated to move it. So they reached back out to us and said, okay, actually, we would, if you're still interested, we would take that offer. And so that's when we kind of started the process in earnest. We said, oh, okay, so let's talk to the bank. Let's talk to to Bangor. Let's get connected with the Southern Maine Finance Authority, who's kind of your liaison with the SBA, and kind of started the process while we were still at that point thinking we were going to do partnership with Chris and Paige, but it just suddenly here it was, this building and this opportunity, and like couldn't shake it. I was like, we gotta see this through. We gotta do it.
And then you told Chris and Paige what your intentions were, and then they came in on it.
I don't know if you've ever turned down like free money before, but it's like the worst feeling in the world to be like, oh, we're gonna say no to your money and we're gonna risk everything.
But they countered you
on this, and then they countered us, which is like crazy. And it was really, really helpful to have them on board, and the process for getting the building was anything but easy. Early on, I remember Terry Trickey was one of the VPs of lending at Bangor that we worked with, and she is really, really excellent at her job. I asked her what would be some of like worst case scenario in this process. She goes, oh, well, I don't know. I think I've probably seen one place that someone was under contract for a place that had once been a laundromat and or a gas station because of the environmental impacts, and then you have to go through all this tape. It's like, but that's kind of worst case scenario. I said, oh, haha, crazy. A week later, there's a certain tone in her email. Hey, we need to do a video call. So building next door used to be a laundromat.
Oh, man.
And there are gas tanks right out front, and you're going through a federally subsidized loan program in the SBA. Here comes the red tape. Here comes the environmental surveys. Here comes the third-party environmental professionals. And all the extra paperwork that goes with that delayed us a couple of months. Yeah. And
these are questions you asked the previous owner. Were there ever laundromats or gas stations?
And then they just say, unknown. That's how they get away from that.
But those are the things you just don't know. So, I mean, to be clear, the reason why those are issues is because of the environmental threats with the chemicals associated with laundromats and gas stations.
Totally valid, totally important, but it definitely threw a wrench in the plans for sure, and give us some more money. It cost more.
Right.
You know, it's suddenly like there's these things that we hadn't anticipated. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Right. You don't know until you know. There's so much you don't know.
That's right. That's right.
And that's kind of the point of this podcast, is to share the stories and to get people to say the unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can live vicariously through hundreds of people who've gone through it, to share that perspective and the things you just don't think about. You get blinded by the dream, the vision, and you'll say yes to anything, and you don't know what questions to ask. Right. So was it always going to be, so you guys today, breakfast, lunch. I think you have 9 items on your breakfast menu. You have 8 items on your lunch menu. You have 4 sides and a handful of pastries.
Yeah, probably a dozen or so different pastries. The menu is, I think, a little bit larger than we had initially anticipated.
Okay.
The pastry program in particular, we thought was just going to be kind of an also ran, like just a few things up there. And then we found that antique case up there, and it's like 6 feet long, and filled it with pastries, and people love it. It's like the first thing people see, and people gravitate towards it.
I was looking at the website and I was like, oh, they're closed.
Actually, I set aside some savory, the French onion buns for you if you want one of those.
I mean, definitely. I will be coming back during normal business hours for sure. This place looks phenomenal. I can tell you're definitely talented. But small menu. I was looking around earlier, counting seats, about 25 to 30 seats.
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. It's 26 is kind of what it is on paper, but we can kind of squeeze in 28. People have kids, and then we have 15 seats out on the deck.
Now, do you have people come in here and like have coffee and sit and like do work, or are you trying to turn?
A couple of those, but I think we were worried about the coffee shop identity, which we did not want to be. That's why when you're looking for an outlet earlier and you're having trouble finding one, that's actually on purpose, because we don't want people.
I'm one of those people, but I'm also very like eyes up. Like, oh, they need a seat, I'm out of here.
Right,
you know?
It's balancing.
But most people don't think like that. It's just because I know. Right. So one thing I want to talk about before we get into the last 5 months, like, what was the build out like?
So with Victoria's construction background, we kind of took on a lot of the work ourselves. We obviously had a qualified electrician, qualified plumber, do all that stuff, and we did pay a tiler for some of the work to do some of the tiling. Looks really, really nice.
Is that in the bathroom?
As in the bathroom, yeah, and then even in the foyer as well.
Okay.
But all the tiling, the subway tile that we did in the kitchen, I think it's like 1,500 tiles we laid ourselves.
Oh, wow.
All the paneling in here, the tables were the original tables to this restaurant that we took home, cut down, refinished, stained, reassembled back here, banquettes.
What was this restaurant before?
It was a breakfast lunch spot.
So was that always what you wanted to do, or is that just kind of what made sense?
It's what made sense for this space. You know, we didn't want to try to shoehorn one specific type of restaurant into a place that maybe it wasn't going to work. It was important for us to actually look at wherever we were going to be and sort of tailor the concept to that community, to that location, sort of feel confident, I think, enough in our skill set that we can execute sort of whatever we wanted to do.
Right.
But it needed to make sense for the community or the town or the city that it was in.
So any lessons around build out that you learned the hard way, aside from like make sure it wasn't a laundromat or a gas station before?
I would say having really clear plans from the get-go, which is sort of difficult because until you get into the space, it's really difficult to make those. I'd never been a general contractor, so working with the electrician and with the plumber and kind of coordinating these guys, the coffee guy to do the coffee install takes coordinating with the plumber, takes coordinating with the electrician, and takes coordinating with the counter fitters. So that was not in my skill set, and there was a lot of on-the-job learning. And as far as the construction stuff went, it was just sort of following Victoria's instructions and example on how to do things. But I think we probably could have saved a little bit of money if I guess I had that skill set. If we had maybe paid someone to do it, then probably would have paid more in general, although they would have been better equipped to make all those pieces of the puzzle fit together that I didn't really know.
Got it. So you guys opened, what was the original date you wanted to open? You wanted to be open by July, June?
When we started this process, when we first went under contract, we were like, oh, maybe like Mother's Day. We'll shoot for Mother's Day, which was like, give me a break. That was not realistic at all because we also really hadn't gotten into the space and seen how much work
Mother's Day is in May. Sorry, Mom. April?
early spring.
Okay.
It was like Easter, right? And that's no chance. And then we thought, okay, Memorial Day. Nope. It was that quickly became not realistic. Then we thought July 4th. Nope. Okay, how about just the end of July?
Was it just scheduling contractors?
Well, we were also still working at Central and Tipo at the time. So on our weekends we were here, and in our time off, the few hours that you get after work, from those places we were here. We got off to a little bit of a late start because we should have pulled permits faster than we did. That probably set us back a month right there, which is, just like a hindsight thing. Like,
it's all the things you wish you knew. Make a checklist. So the next time,
yes,
I need to start building that checklist. Maybe like a shared document with all my listeners. Like, what are the things, the checklist?
And doing things in order, timeline wise, because the electrician can't be here until, the demo of that wall happened. So that set us back. And there's a lot of sort of delays that frankly I think probably came from inexperience in doing this, and I think we're now much better suited. If we had to do it again, I think we could do it.
Right.
We could shave off a couple of months and do it for cheaper, and then the real icing on the cake that we had was we were feeling really confident to open early mid-August. I think we had said August 11th. Felt pretty good about it. Started getting the team in place, and then first week we were in here in mid-August, I noticed that the walk-in wasn't holding temp.
Ooh.
I was like, okay. And then I kind of realized some like imperfections in the wall, and I pulled that back, and I was like, I should have done this earlier. When we had done their initial walkthrough, walk-in worked. They had just,
mold? Imperfections in the wall?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So it's stick-built. We knew that they had just replaced the compressor in the spring. We were in there. It was cold. Great. Walk-in works. Didn't really think about it again. Walk-in works. Summertime. It's 90 degrees outside. Turn on the walk-in, and I'm in the walk-in. I'm like, it's cool in here, but it's not cold. And I put a thermometer in there, and it was like constantly running. The evaporator was constantly running, and it was 50-something degrees. Ugh. And my heart kind of sank, and we started pulling things back on the wall, and it was mold, rot, ants. So I was like, okay, we have to pull all this out. We have to pull the evaporator down. They come out, they look at the evaporator and say, this evaporator is wicked old. you should get a new one. I said, that's going to be $10,000. We're already behind schedule and a little over budget. I don't think I want to do that. We're going to roll with it and run it as long as we can. We rebuilt it, put the evaporator back up. Evaporator starts failing.
Oh, man.
Yeah. There's a slow leak. So $1,000 to get it recharged. They patched the leak. 2 days later, there's another leak somewhere. Refill it, recharge it, patch the leak. There's another $1,000, and we're still not open.
Could have just gotten a new.
We should have done it from the get-go. Should have done it from the get-go.
Well, that's what happens. Yeah.
Right.
And that's actually, I had Stephanie Robson on the show, and she's a Cornell professor, and she does restaurant design and planning and all this stuff. She did a 3-part series on basically restaurant back of house layout and how to build a kitchen in a way that makes sense. And at some point in that workshop, she was talking about what do you buy used and what do you buy new. She's like, always buy refrigeration new, because
I would agree with that.
that's tables, shelving, used.
Yes.
Refrigerators, you never know what the story was. But you guys were trying to do it. It was kind of not necessarily turnkey, but I'm assuming when you bought this place, you were buying some of the.
There was some equipment here, but it was in some rough shape, and I think, honestly, before we had Chris and Paige on board, we were just going to kind of run with the crappy equipment, and just as long as we could. And having Chris and Paige on board was okay, I think now we can actually. We're not gonna. I don't have a $10,000 garland range back there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But we can at least afford to get something new that we know works.
Right. Because
everything in here was in pretty significant disrepair.
Yeah,
I actually don't know how they ran a restaurant before. I
right.
Really
and if you're just starting,
and these are numbers that I'm not familiar with, writing checks for $10,000, $15,000
if you lose an entire
time.
walk-in, when you're just getting started and you're already undercapitalized, that could really hurt you.
That walk-in set us back 2 to 3 weeks and probably an extra $20,000.
Did you lose product?
No, I didn't have anything in there yet.
Oh, yeah, right.
Having Chris and Paige, I was also able, I had already ordered stuff. I was able to store it at Tipo.
Nice.
In Central.
Nice.
Which has been huge. If we had just done it from the get-go, like I said, having a overarching plan that would have been included in, addressing that walk-in would have been included in, we probably could have saved several visits of the recharge, of patching holes on a system that was, we're trying to save a sinking ship with that walk-in.
Yeah.
And that compressor, the real icing is that compressor that they bragged that they had just replaced in April was for a completely different refrigerant than was actually being used in it. So it burned out the compressor within less than a year.
Man.
So that, it's all ship shape up there. So we needed a new compressor, evaporator. We rebuilt the stick built. Then you have to get electricians out.
So now you're open. September.
Yeah.
You open after all this.
Yeah.
What has the past 5 months been like for you in terms of first of all, I want to point out you're operating in the black.
Yeah.
Which is a testament. I think there's a reason why they say get 1 year of operating capital minimum when you open a restaurant. It's because it might take a year for you to build that clientele, to build up, to get into the black. So I think that it's only going up from here.
I sure hope so. Yeah, we haven't even seen a summer yet. And
that's right.
We're already finding constraints and limitations to the space is probably our biggest concern right now. We need
volume.
We need a bigger mixer. We need, it's a very small kitchen back there. We wanted everything to be very lean and small and to be operated with the smallest crew possible because labor is a real headache and issue in the industry right now.
Is that why the menu's small?
It is why the menu's small. Yeah, we want to execute really well. I mean, there's 2 full-time, including myself, in the kitchen and 1 part-time guy doing prep and dishwashing. I'm starting to have him on the line. And then Victoria doing the pastry program for us.
Okay. So do you mind getting into some of the economics? You said you're single digits, 5%?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There was that. The walk-in was a huge expense. We also had to replace a blower, the motor on the blower for our hot air system. That was about a little over $2,000. We had to install a sump pump in an emergency in a rainstorm because the crawl space was flooding. There's another $1,000. I know we're going to need a new mixer. That's probably going to be, including electrician to come out here, probably $17,000.
Yeah. But I think people get in trouble sometimes too at their restaurant because it's I use the analogy when we're kids, we grow up in our this house, our parents have this nice, beautiful house. And then we're grown ups and we're like, we want the nice, beautiful house. Well, What about that shitty house when you were 1 to 5 years old. Do you remember that shitty house that your parents lived in? Like, you gotta start where you can.
Start somewhere and
Right.
put in the sweat equity.
Exactly.
That's kinda where we're
Don't build your dream restaurant out of the gates.
Yeah.
Like, start where you can, and then like the beautiful thing about this, and I'm not wishing ill on your you would call them not your neighbors, but they're actually your tenants, right? If for whatever reason that they go out of business, and you have lines out the door every day, like, knock out a wall. So you can start small,
Right.
and let the cash flow determine your growth.
Right.
I think you could probably even give them like a notice if you needed to take over that space because you own it. Like, hey, you got a year, we're going to take over that space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to put that out there with your tenants, maybe be listening to this, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have the option.
Yeah. I think there's its own challenges with being such a small team. I think we wanted to keep it really lean. To almost make it failure proof, or at least mitigate the risk as much as we could. But we've actually been pleasantly a bit busier than we anticipated.
That's awesome.
When we're doing your business plan and they say, okay, project a year, 3 years, 5 years of sales, it's sort of almost like grabbing numbers out of thin air. You make your best educated guess, but I'm not in the space, and we did not have historical financials to look at from this previous restaurant. We bought the building, we did not buy the business. So what we ended up finding is that we were actually fairly accurate in our projections, which I'm a little bit surprised by. And some of the costs that we had projected to be higher, for example, the rates on the loan itself have actually come down.
Oh, wow.
A couple percentage points. And one of the loans, it's sort of broken up into a few different loans, and one of them is almost half the rate. We projected 8%, 10%, and it's about 5%.
Okay.
So some of those things have been better than we expected. Nothing has really been worse than we expected. We're busier than we projected for this time of year. We anticipated losing money this time of year, like most restaurants do.
Yeah. So I'd love to come back in a year from now, or maybe like, October or November of next year, to be like, where are we at after that summer? Because for some context, we're in Saco, Maine.
Yep.
We're on the coast of Maine, about 30 minutes south of Portland, 20 minutes south of Portland.
It's about 20 minutes.
Yeah. Huge, like vacation land up here. In the summer, like, people come to Saco. Like
10 minutes from Old Orchard.
Yep.
Biddeford Pools, 10 minutes away. UNE is 10 minutes away.
Yeah. So like, the fact that you're in the black during the slow season, I think is super hopeful. I would love to know where you guys are at after this summer. That'd be really fun. I mean, you opened in September, so like that's when things are starting to slow down, right? What are your prime costs?
Prime costs, we're keeping food costs. I guess total prime is probably high 60s, 70%-ish. We only have 5 months, I guess, under our belt, so it's fluctuated a little bit. We were shiny and new, and early December slowed down. It picked right back up again for the holidays. Food costs, we try to keep just under 20%. We've been able to do that. And labor is, to me, the biggest
40%.
cost for. No, it's closer to 50.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it's a small space, and that includes ourselves. We are paying ourselves a salary, sort of like the way Paige and Chris have done.
I love that.
Central and T-Pose, it's an S Corp. So owners of the business can also operate as employees and receive, a paycheck.
So what's any other benefits to doing an S Corp?
In particular, I don't know if I'm necessarily qualified to speak to them. I'm not sure. Yeah, it worked for us. It's what
I think if you plan on
advised
scaling, there are certain tax benefits. I'm not an accountant or a CPA, so I don't like to speak to it because I don't want to be wrong. But I mean, I think Paige spoke to Chris during the pandemic, how he was able to go on unemployment. And I think that's another, if there's a disaster or whatever, but I think, so you are including your income
Yes, so
in that prime cost.
That I'm including our salaries, which I also know can be part of overhead, right? You include that as a fixed cost.
Right. So you're saying, sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly. We're including our own salaries in that. So there's no additional, the only overhead is, our utilities and our
So you're at 50% labor, but if you were to take 10% off of that and put that towards profit, you'd be doing like 15% profit right now, right? If you were operating like a lot of people do, where they basically treat profit like what's ever left over.
Right. And I have no illusion that we are breaking even or a bit above breaking even right now, because we are 33% of the team. It's a really small team.
Well, I think that's really important. So like your labor cost is 33. So if you're doing 50%, you're closer to about 15%. You and Paige are probably what's 33% of 50%?
33% of 50.
16%
is 16, half of 33.
Yeah, 16%. So you're doing about 20% profit if
we
you
pulled ourselves out of the
operate like
equation.
a lot of restaurants do. And I think I 100% am about paying yourself a wage. Like, you are an operational expense. If you're working in that restaurant, if you're there every day, you are an employee of that restaurant, and you pay yourself like an employee. And the whole idea is to remove yourself eventually, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And then that salary shifts towards paying somebody to be there in your place.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anything we haven't discussed up to this point in terms of things you do right, things that you learn the hard way, lessons you want to pay forward?
Well, I've really kind of started to really enjoy the mentorship and the teaching aspect of it. Granted, the team is very small, but we've been really selective in the people that we take on. Kind of
4
embodying
employees?
our ethos, and what we're trying to do. The name of the restaurant, Finestkind, which is kind of this old down east fishing term. I think it comes from like an old English, like fine as kine, which is an old word for cattle, like basically strong as an ox, good as it gets. That was the fishing day, finest kind, like good as it gets. And I also really like that it had the word finest from our fine dining background, and then kind, because we want to have this. The brand I think is huge today.
Did you get help with the brand? Did you go to something?
The logo work and some of that work, we did.
Same people as Hugo's by any chance?
No, we didn't. That was, I think, Mite in Maine does them. They do great work.
Yeah.
They're out of our price range, but you get what you pay for with them. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, we bootstrapped a lot of it. No, it was a friend of ours who's a friend of a friend, really, who's a graphic designer and does media branding work.
I was gonna say in terms of brand and marketing, we only open for 5 months. 3,592 followers on Instagram. I mean, I feel like that's pretty good out of the gates.
That's not bad,
right?
Yeah.
Who covers most? Are you guys doing any marketing? Do you go out of your way to market, or you just focus on like the 4 walls right now?
It's sort of the 4 walls. I would love to be able to have a little, be able to delegate, I guess, some of the media marketing stuff out a little bit, just because it's not necessarily our area of expertise, but Victoria handles most of it, and she does a very, very good job. Yeah. But she also has a lot on her
she's
plate.
good at that too.
She has a lot on her plate, and I know, eventually we're going to have to start delegating stuff to people who can specialize and focus on it as we scale.
I did notice, I look a little bit at your tech stack. You are using, I wrote it down, Clover?
We use Clover, yeah.
Any other technology that you're excited about that you are willing to, endorse?
I wish.
How'd you land on Clover? Curious.
Some of the features that they have are just kind of built in with the base price. Like I said, we very much came into this with the mentality of bootstrapping it, doing it, not necessarily just always going for the cheapest thing. For example, I had used Toast for years at Hugo's, and Toast is such a great platform. But some of those features that we were looking for in Toast were additional add-ons, which I think if we were a larger company, I think you can stomach the extra $300 a month. But, starting small, we wanted to go with something that was a little bit more all-encompassing. And we were also able to do Clover through Bangor Savings. They're sort of a affiliated third party. So we're able to negotiate better credit card interest rates, which did beat Toast and beat a lot of the other ones.
What rates did you get?
They typically tend to be under 3% all in. So
yeah, that is huge. I typically, there are 3. If you're asking me what POS company to go with, honestly, this is really what I feel like. If you're thinking your POS is going to be the thing that makes you successful,
we've used.
I'm not
so
saying
many.
buy a piece of shit POS. I'm not saying buy a POS. Yeah.
Bump.
But like there are at least 5 POS systems out there that if you go with them, like you'll be fine. And the reason you fail isn't going to be because of the POS.
Right.
Toast is the most recommended on the show. Spot On, I think, is giving Toast a run for their money.
I've not used them.
Those are also enterprise, more like I would recommend those for more full service, like larger operations.
Right.
Right. If you're a cafe or a coffee shop, you can get by with a Square or a Clover.
Yep.
Square is the most recommended for like the smaller operations. Yep. But I think, Clover, I've never really heard horrible things about Clover.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
It's a small investment in the equipment, the Duo system that we have. So it's a guest-facing thing, so we don't have to take somebody's credit card because we have people who are handling pastries. We didn't want basically someone taking money and credit cards from people and then also handling pastries. So everything's on their side of it. So it was a little more expensive for that setup. I think it was.
What are the integrations?
Like $1,700. Right now, we just have online ordering, but we think we're probably going to go with a third-party delivery and DoorDash or Grubhub. DoorDash is the big one.
You're going to treat that like a marketing arm?
I think so. I think our food lends itself pretty well to takeout. We do a fair amount of takeout anyway, just from our website.
Yeah.
So it makes sense as long as we can price it in a way that kind of factors in the margins that they take.
Yeah. I'm looking at the time, man. I'm really enjoying the conversation. But I want to respect your time and get out of here. The time we agreed on. Before we say goodbye, a couple questions.
Sure.
What is one thing about your business, a system, a process, a procedure, a value that makes you truly unstoppable?
I think we have weekly meetings with the whole team, something that we started a month or 2 ago. We found ourselves getting into a routine of kind of everyone just showing up for work and then leaving, and I think we were starting to lose that kind of overarching why we're here. So we've started implementing a weekly meeting where we go over, kind of like we did it at Central, where we started going over not just the technical housekeeping, but also what are some things outside of the space that were inspired by other hospitality trends, or a book I read, or a quote that someone had seen, or an experience they had out in the community, and having everybody share that. I think we've started to kind of develop this culture of everybody here is here working towards the same thing. And I think that's like a number one for a team.
Are you using EOS by any chance?
EOS.
The Entrepreneurial Operating System?
I'm not.
Oh, man. Their format for a level 10 weekly meeting is fire.
Cool.
It was introduced in the book Traction by Gino Wickman, and then the EOS series kind of spun off from there, where they have what the heck is EOS, the EOS life, and like I highly recommend. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do.
I'd love to check it out.
Yeah, it's super powerful.
So having everybody kind of wane at that time. We take time to eat. Maybe it's usually the end of the week, so pastries that won't last for the weekend. We sit and we have some pastries. That's the one time where we do like a shift drink. Sorry, the train goes by right there.
Does the train stop right there too?
The train station is right there. Yeah,
I might be taking the train up real soon.
It's down Easter right there. Yeah. Take it right to Boston. And it's been really great. And we kind of bring those lessons throughout the week, and then we have another meeting, and a new source of inspiration.
I love that.
Yeah.
The reason
gets
why
everybody on board.
Yeah, the reason why I asked if it was EOS, because that's how they suggest you start a weekly meeting, is you say what's one piece of personal good news and professional good news. So I was wondering if it was a spin-off of that. That's what sparked my curiosity.
Yeah,
but
it's kind of how we treat it.
But I love the way you're doing it. Yeah. So the mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. And we're going to do that by transforming one restaurant owner at a time. But how have you personally transformed? How are you a better man today versus the man you were when you got started? Just say the boy you were when you got started.
The boy from New Hampshire. I would say it's perspective. It's the perspective that there is no substitute for time, for doing it, for putting in the hours, for learning, for getting your hands into it, and always trying to remind yourself why you're doing it. Because if you lose the plot, you're going to lose the why. And then you're going to lose the drive.
Yeah. This is the last question. It's a doozy. I get eye rolls. Get ready for it. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure.
Cataclysmic. Yeah.
With the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the
3.
good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
3. I would say, don't be too cool to care.
1.
That's 1. I would say, we're here in this industry. It's really unique in that we're here to serve people and make people happy. And everything we do in this building goes towards that.
I love that. And number 3.
3. Enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, it's not going to be.
What's the point?
What's the point? And there's always sacrifices along the way. You're not always going to enjoy it, but I guess knowing what's important to you. Know what's important to you. Going to change my answer? We're gonna know what's important to you.
That's perfect. This has been a lot of fun, man. I try to find all my guests. This is my North Star, this question right here. I know I said that was the last question. We're officially wrapping it up now. Who do you think I should get on the show? Who do you respect and admire? Somebody who is a wealth of knowledge, is running their businesses well. From what you know, they're profitable. Not that it's all about the money, but I think fiscal responsibility is something we should all aim for.
Does it have to be a restaurant owner? Going to be another chef?
I do try to talk to owners. I'm not a chef. I'm not even an owner, but I really try to focus on the business.
Okay. Then I'm going to throw a shout out to Betsy English.
Okay.
Actually, she owns Quanto Basta in Portland.
Betsy English.
Betsy
Look
English,
out.
yeah.
I'm coming after you. I'd love to make it happen. And how can we connect with you? If we want to come check out Finest Kind, maybe we have questions for you. Maybe we want to come work for you.
Sure. 17 Pepperell Square here in Saco, sunny Saco. You can follow us on Instagram, Finestkind Maine. Our website is finestkindmaine.com. And if you want to send me a line personally, my email is tom, T-O-M, at, you guessed it, finestkindmaine.com.
Awesome. And this is episode 1159. If you want to check out the show notes, we'll have everything summarized right there. Links to any tools or services recommended, your contact information. And Tom, I literally cannot do what I do without people like you being willing to let me come in to your space, to get you to get vulnerable, to open up. You make this work possible. And there is no questioning, my friend. You are unstoppable.
Thank you. I appreciate the time and the platform, and this was fun.
Thank you.
It's cool.
Cheers.
Cheers.